Letting interest run in the background without understanding it is how small debts become long burdens that feel permanent. People swipe, make only the minimum, and tell themselves the balance will sort itself out later. What is actually happening is that the charge for borrowing is piling onto itself, so the cost grows faster than your payments. Picture yourself busy with work, checking a statement half awake, and assuming nothing big is changing while the math behind that balance is already dragging tomorrow into today. Compound interest is the math of money earning money. When interest is added to your balance and then future interest is calculated on that new total, the growth is not a straight line anymore. It bends upward on the savings side and it bends against you on the debt side. That curve is what separates people who feel like they are always catching up from people who feel like time is quietly doing part of the work. Simple interest is easy to picture, a fixed cut added each period on the original amount only. Compound interest ignores that boundary and keeps folding prior gains into the base before calculating the next gain. On savings, that means modest growth that accelerates without you hustling for each extra dollar. On debt, it means a balance that keeps generating more cost, even if you do not make another purchase. The mechanism is the same, only the direction changes. Imagine you drop $100 into an account and then leave it alone. You earn a bit of interest, and that bit stays in the account. Next period, interest is calculated on the original money plus the interest you already earned. The inputs did not change, the process did. This is why time matters more than hustle when it comes to growth. The earlier you get the engine spinning, the longer it works for you. You can make a lot of small, boring choices and still end up with a meaningful result because the structure is doing the heavy lifting. You do not need drama. You need repetition. When the rate is about 5% a year, the new interest is always based on a slightly larger number than last year. That is all it takes for the curve to tilt. At first, the difference is hard to notice, then it becomes obvious, and eventually it dominates the story. On a long timeline, the early years teach patience, and the later years reward it. Think of rolling a snowball down a long hill. At the top, it barely grows. Midway down, you can feel it get heavier and faster. Near the bottom, it carries momentum that no push could imitate. Compound interest is that same hill, and you control when you start rolling. The most common beginner mistake is treating growth like a paycheck, linear and anchored to how hard you work this month. People look for a perfect pick, jump in and out, or assume that starting later with larger deposits is the same as starting earlier with smaller ones. They overlook that time is not neutral in this game. Every delay shrinks the part of the outcome driven by the curve and increases the part that must be funded by you. Here's what that mistake costs in practical terms. You end up doing more of the work with fresh contributions because you shorten the window where gains earn gains. Your deposits dominate the final total, and the growth looks like a small add-on rather than the main driver. It is like showing up near the end of a marathon and trying to sprint the whole distance at once. You can move, but you cannot borrow the miles you skipped. Put in $100 each month, and over time, a smaller share of your annual increase comes from your new deposits, and a larger share comes from the growth on what is already there. That is compounding on contributions plus compounding on prior gains. The later you start that pattern, the more you must contribute to get the same effect. The math is indifferent to your excuses. The correction is plain. Automate steady contributions into an account that actually compounds and stop interrupting the process. Pick a simple, broad investment that earns, reinvests, and keeps fees low, so more of the growth stays inside the snowball. Set the transfer on a date you cannot miss. Leave it alone through boring stretches and headlines. If you want more action, add more contributions. Do not yank the engine apart. Another mistake is pulling out gains to fund little treats because it feels like you are harvesting success. You break the link that makes the next round bigger, and you keep resetting the base that future interest uses. And draining interest now is the same as taxing your future self heavily before growth has had time to matter. If you must withdraw, do it from planned contributions, not from the seed that makes the compounding work. Start 10 years later, and you will have to save a lot more each month to reach the same destination as someone who began earlier with smaller steps. That extra money is not a punishment. It is just the bill for skipping the years when gains could have been compounding on themselves. You cannot cram compounding into a short window and get the same curve. The only lever you truly control is when you start and how much you add. This is the point where the next financial decision shows up. Should you invest, or should you kill debt first, or should you build a cash buffer? The answer depends on the rates involved and the risk of being forced to pull money out at a bad time. High-rate debt grows against you through the same mechanism, so it deserves priority. A small, stable cash buffer keeps you from interrupting your investments with emergency withdrawals. The sequence is decide which forces to stop, decide which to start, and then commit to a routine that does not invite you to tinker. Here's a clean, real-life picture. Two coworkers start at the same company. One sets up automatic contributions right away, keeps them steady, and never touches the account. The other says they will start after the next promotion, then after a move, then after a trip. Years pass. The first person's account looks unimpressive for a while, then starts building momentum. The second finally starts, adds larger amounts, but never feels ahead because their results are dominated by deposits instead of growth on growth. They both worked. Only one recruited time. On the debt side, a card charging around 20% can trap you because the part of your payment that reaches the principal is tiny until the balance drops. Interest on interest is working against you, turning small slips into long tails of repayment. You are feeding the wrong snowball. The fix is not glamorous. Refinance to a lower rate if possible, stop adding new charges, and push larger payments so compounding has less fuel. Putting this into practice is not about finding magic rates. It's about creating a system where your money is almost guaranteed to grow in itself, and your debts are starved of the chance to do the same. Automate contributions into a vehicle that compounds, eliminate, or reduce anything compounding the other way, and avoid behaviors that reset the base. Small, consistent moves win here because they keep the engine running. You are not trying to impress someone this month. You are building a machine that future periods will measure against a bigger base. Fees and churn quietly fight compounding. Every extra layer you add to your investments that takes a slice slows the engine. Every trade you make without a plan risks pulling money out of the curve and back into cash where it rests instead of works. If you want to adjust, do it on a set schedule with rules, not in reaction to mood. Compounding rewards patience. It does not reward fidgeting. Reinvesting distributions matters as much as the rate itself. If your account throws off cash and you let it sit idle, you flatten your own curve. Set it to reinvest by default. That single toggle is often the difference between a line that drifts and a line that tilts. And once you set it, stop checking it every day like a weather app. The weather is not the point. The season is. Compounding also changes how you see windfalls. A tax refund or a bonus is not just a larger deposit. It is a chance to enlarge the base that will be used over and over for future growth. Dropping it into the engine early can be worth more than splitting it into extras that vanish. If you aim for comfort today, at least admit that you are trading away years of repeated growth. Make that trade with open eyes, not by default. The single most important shift here is to stop treating growth as a reward you collect and start treating it as a process you protect. You do not chase returns. You build a base and guard the compounding on it. You measure progress by how well the machine keeps running, not by how dramatic the last statement looked. Once you lock into that mindset, your choices line up fast. Start, automate, avoid interruptions, and let time do what it always does when you stop getting in its way. Next, we tackle what inflation does to savings, because understanding how rising prices interact with compounding is the difference between building a number and building real buying power.